President Biden has appointed a new chief of staff. His name is Jeff Zients. I think we should be concerned. This is not someone that is going to be favorable in reference to progressive policies. And also, Jeff is straight up corporate. Now, I want to give a shout out to Case Study QB. I want to show this clip, and I have an article from Common Dreams I want to go to about Mr. Jeff and why you should be concerned. But shout out to Case for this clip. They're talking about the Jeff. Here we go.
Jeff Zients will become President Biden's new chief of staff. This follows the report that Ron Klain is stepping down from the role in coming weeks. Now, Zients helped oversee the White House's coronavirus response. What do you foresee will be his top priorities in his new position?
Oh, I can't say. I mean, I think that Ron Klain certainly was someone who was really masterful at holding the Democratic coalition together, at making progressives feel heard and included, and kind of integrating some of their priorities into what was often a more centrist agenda. Whether that's going, I don't think we know yet whether the new chief of staff represents a change in direction by the administration or just a change in personnel.
Jeff Zients.
It's definitely a change in direction, and we're going to get into that. I'm going to go ahead and put up that article from Common Dreams because, again, this is not someone who's in favor of progressive policies. Like I said, he is very corporate, and I think this should be very concerning to people as well, because there have been talks about President Biden trying to privatize Medicare. So let's go into it. Again, this is from Common Dreams. Catastrophic decision, progressive rip choice of Jeff Zients for chief of staff. Zients, as a businessman, embodies much of the corporate misconduct the executive branch, led by a Democratic Party, ought to be cracking down on. Now, that's coming from a progressive strategist. So again, like I said, it doesn't necessarily represent just a change in the personnel, so to speak. It represents a change in direction. So moving further away from those progressive policies. So let's go on. Reports Sunday that President Joe Biden had chosen Jeff Zients to replace outgoing White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain were met with alarm among progressive watchdogs who pointed to Zients' disastrous tenure as the administration's pandemic czar, as well as his history in the corporate world, where he built a fortune investing in healthcare companies accused of fraud. I'm going to highlight this piece here. Now, this is the person that Joe Biden has appointed. An individual who represented companies, or built a fortune, investing in healthcare companies that are accused of fraud. This is who he appoints. Complete opposite from the gentleman that was in this seat. Now, I don't know why Ron is stepping down. I didn't find information about that. But you should be alarmed. We're going to keep a watch on Jeff. Klain, who developed a solid working relationship with progressives in Congress, is expected to depart shortly after Biden's State of the Union address on February 7th. Oh, by the way, that should be interesting. We might have to stream that. Oh, boy. Revolving Door Project Executive Director Jeff Hauser called the elevation of Zients to White House Chief of Staff a catastrophic decision. He said in a statement that the Biden administration has been at its best when it has been on the attack against corporate excesses that wide majorities of Americans find abhorrent. Americans are appalled by profiting in healthcare. Jeff Zients has become astonishingly rich by profiteering in healthcare. Americans are aghast at how social media companies have built monopolies and violated privacy laws. Zients served on the board of directors of Facebook as it was defending itself against growing attacks from both political parties. So we have a guy here who was just not just a part of the corrupt healthcare industry, but he's also a part of the censorship lane from Facebook. It doesn't get any worse than that. It really doesn't. The Revolving Doors Project. Daniel and Max wrote for the American Prospect last year that Zients, who was replaced as the pandemic response coordinator back in April, has controlled and invested in and helped and oversee healthcare companies that were forced to pay tens of millions of dollars to settle allegations of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. And this is why I brought up the point that Joe Biden, there have been rumors of him trying to privatize Medicare. So let's make the connection here. Ron decides he's going to step down. Still don't know why Ron is leaving. Could have been tapped, could have been pushed out. We don't know. Ron decides to step down. He's someone that supported more of the progressive policies, the progressive stance. Biden appoints Jeff Zients to come in and fill that chief of staff role. And Jeff Zients is someone who is corporate. He was a part of the Facebook board. He was involved with these healthcare companies that are accused of fraud. And the fraud that they are accused of, they were forced to pay tens of millions of dollars to settle allegations of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. Let's connect the two. Why would you appoint, if you're trying to keep Medicare the way it is, which he has claimed, why would you appoint someone who was involved in these companies that were forced to pay millions for Medicare and Medicaid fraud? Why would you do that? Why would you do that unless you were trying to privatize Medicare? Does that sound like a president who wants to improve Medicare, who wants to extend Medicare? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Why would you appoint this guy? Let's go on. They have also been accused of surprise billing practices and even medical malpractice. Taken together, an examination of the companies that made Zients rich paints a picture of a man who seized on medical providers as a way to capitalize on the suffering of sick Americans. In the end, it seems to have paid off. So I'm going to see what Biden says at the State of the Union address, because if he gives any kind of chatter about helping people with health care in this country, you can call BS on that. Let's all remember this. The most egregious violation is documented in the 2015 Justice Department settlement announcement. Portfolio Logic, the investment firm Zients founded with his own money, agreed to pay almost $7 million to resolve allegations of fraudulent Medicare and Medicaid billing involving a subsidiary, Pediatric Services of American Healthcare, or PSA, that it purchased in 2007. Hopefully, Zients will prove us wrong, but unless that unlikely and fortuitous surprise occurs, Biden will need a quick hook. Progressives have also been highly critical of Zients' performance in government. In early 2022, Bogus Law urged that Biden administration to fire Zients over his failure to provide the materials necessary to improve the U.S. response to the pandemic or the guidance necessary to keep the pandemic under control. So this guy was also they urged Joe Biden to fire him when he was in charge of the pandemic control. So let's go on. Following news that he would be leaving the pandemic response post, Public Citizen's Robert Weissman lamented that Zients refused to pay appropriate attention to global solutions to the global pandemic because of political concerns or otherwise. And the Zients-led pandemic response refused to challenge Big Pharma's monopoly control in the U.S. and globally over technologies that relied crucially on public support. As a result, The United States and other rich countries failed to expand the jab supply sufficiently to meet global need. Without adequate supply, efforts to bolster low-income country distribution and delivery systems consequently have lagged and have been similarly under-resourced. During this time, as pandemic response coordinator, Zients was far and away the wealthiest member of Biden's cabinet, disclosing assets worth at least $89.3 million and as much as $442.8 million. Do you know what it must be like to have assets worth $89.3 million? Remember, these are things that he owns. He made this money off of sick people. There isn't a nicer way for me to put it. He made this money. He profited off of sick people, sick poor people, sick working class people. And this is who Biden appoints as the chief of staff. Citing the Revolving Doors Project work, progressive strategist Murshid Zahid said Sunday that Zients, as a businessman, embodies much of a corporate misconduct the executive branch, led by a Democratic Party, ought to be cracking down on. But the Biden White House doesn't appear remotely concerned about Zients' corporate past. Of course not, because it's a corporate party. This is why, even if you have grassroots politicians a part of a corporate party, it doesn't make that much of a difference because the party is still corporate and you still get things like this. With Biden expected to launch a bid for re-election in the coming weeks, the New York Times reported that the president could lean on Zients to help run the government while other advisors focus on the politics of winning a second term. Hauser said Sunday that hopefully Zients will prove us wrong, but unless that unlikely and fortuitous surprise occurs, Biden will need a quick hook. It's a corporate party. It's a corporate party. I'm going to wait for that State of the Union address. I'm going to wait for that. I dare him to say something about helping Americans with health care. I'll go to some of the comments here. Natalie says Medicare Advantage is private health care in disguise already. Yeah, that's another one where when I worked at the skilled nursing facility, some of the patients had that. Like they had Medicare and they had the Medicare Advantage, but you have a good point there. Red said privatization caused these problems. Of course they want to privatize their solutions. I hear you. I hear you. Corporate party, man. Like this is terrible. Terry said this is awful. Wow, what a crook, Zients. Miguel, it's a corporate party and you're not in it. So a caller called in last week and said that the Democratic Party has been moving further to the left, and we had a big disagreement about this on Call In. For those of you who tuned in, you know what I'm talking about. I had a big disagreement about that. This is just another example. How is this moving further to the left? That's moving further to the right. You see, they got rid of the progressive guy. Again, we don't know why he's stepping down, but Ron is stepping down. He was the one that was more on board with the progressive policies, and they are replacing him with someone who is not. So please tell me again how the Democratic Party is supposedly moving further to the left. I come with receipts, boo. I come with receipts.